Are we
just waiting?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, folks. Instagram is super slow. We're going to try this.
I thought
Usually
maybe you
about as
wanted
soon
me
as
to start. I didn't know. I was like, oh, am I
No,
supposed to say something first?
no, we're good. We are live in X. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get going here in just a second. Once we get Instagram going, which maybe it's going to decide not to. Then I have no idea.
Yeah. So be it.
That's right. So
Wasn't meant to be.
wasn't meant to be. All right. Welcome to your weekly college basketball bracketology update with America's #1 bracketologist, the most accurate Bracketdom of bracketometry.com. He's 124 spots better than ESPN's Joe Lunardi and 178 spots better than CBS's Jerry Palm, according to Bracket Matrix. So if you really want to know where your team stands, you've come to the right place. All right. So how you doing? You had a good week?
Fantastic. Absolutely. I have college basketball to watch. So always having a great week when that's the case.
Yeah, you're down there in Texas. I'm up here in Michigan. We've had some snow. So there you go. We've had a contrast.
Not, but hey, it's getting kind of cold. So it's we'll take
What's that, like 60 degrees?
That's our cold.
All right. So, Dom, we now have a tiny sliver of data on teams, just a couple games, usually for most teams, and the conferences. So we can begin to make some projections. You've made some here. We'll show them in a little bit. But why don't you? I think the most important thing to point out is for you as a bracketologist, you're obviously a fan of college basketball, but how do you prevent your fandom from getting in the way of sort of your picks and seeding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really don't have much fandom. I mean, I went to Texas State. We've hardly even ever sniffed the tournament, so there's no bias there. And yeah, sometimes I find myself rooting for certain storylines each year's, but if anything, I find that almost making me want to put them lower because in my mind, I'm always being like, pessimistic, thinking, oh, I really like this team this year, so they're probably going to be the one that gets underseeded. So if anything, it's the opposite way around, but usually don't find that to be too much of a problem. No.
All right, so we're gonna get going here, and we're gonna start with the seeding projections that you have, your initial list. Why don't you run down them? I mean, you have on the screen here. You have number 1 is Houston as your number 1 overall seed, and then just kind of go through the rest of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, at this point, for anyone wondering, this is more based on just my guesses than what teams have actually done at this point. Once we get a little later in the season, it'll be really, truly resume based. Right now, it's trying to mix a little bit of, okay, this team has lived up to what they are expected to be, but also really just projecting where they are going to be later down the line. So for the 1 seeds, I just put one team from each of the main conferences except the Big East, and I'll get to why that's the case in a second. Houston and Purdue I had as my top 2 teams at the start of the year, and they haven't done anything to change my mind on that.
Sure.
And then right now, Alabama and Louisville, I could have gone either way between Louisville and Duke right now for picking a 1 seed out of the ACC. I'll give it to Louisville after their big win over Kentucky last night. And then Alabama, the top of the SECs looked a little iffy so far this year, but they're the ones that have probably looked the best so far with a big win over St. John's. And I imagine the SEC will get at least 1 seed by the time the season's done. So putting them there at the moment. And then, yeah, as in UConn would then be the odd team out in terms of a Power 5 conference champion that I'm not currently putting on the 1 seed line. And that's just, again, looking further down the line, thinking of these teams, who's going to have the better strength of schedule at the end of the year. And the Big East of just the 5 power conferences kind of seems to be by far lacking the most depth. So I think they might be just as good as those other 4 teams, but I don't think they're going to have nearly as many chances in conference to bolster that resume as the teams I did put as the 1s right now.
And then just to go through the rounding out the rest of the seeding list on the 2 lines, you have Illinois, and you mentioned UConn. We got Arizona, Duke. On the 3 line, we have St. John's, Kentucky, Michigan, Florida. And the 4 line, we have BYU, UCLA, Gonzaga, and Michigan State.
Yeah, and it's rounding out the 2 line. I think Arizona makes sense right there. They had the big win over defending champions Florida. Right now, they're probably looking like the biggest threat to Houston in the Big 12. Illinois looking like potentially the biggest threat to Purdue, and they've also gotten a nice win early on over Tech. And who was the other one I had there? I'm forgetting already. Oh, and Duke, of course. Yeah, and who I already mentioned before, who I think's in a coin flip with Louisville right now. My gut actually, I would probably say more likely than not, I think Duke might take that spot from Louisville when it's all said and done, but it's so close. I was just rewarding Louisville for that early win. And yeah, the 3 seed line, that's kind of more of the these teams I think are probably better than this, but they've maybe struggled a little bit early on so far. Obviously, Kentucky has that loss to Louisville. Florida has that loss to Zona and almost lost to Florida State last night. St. John's with that loss to Alabama. Michigan, the only undefeated team I have on that 3 line, and they barely scraped by Wake Forest the other night. So I'm going to chalk that off as a fluky early close game, or maybe Wake Forest is better than expected early. But if they keep playing like that, that 3 line might be dropping a little bit lower going forward.
Yep. All right. So then let's talk about the conferences. And so one of the important things, of course, of the conferences is that this determines how many teams ultimately end up in the tournament based from your conference. So the stronger your conference is, obviously more teams you get in. And so I imagine most of the movement is for conference strength. The schedule is pretty much before January.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because once you're in conference, your conference strength of schedule isn't changing much because obviously all the teams are playing each other. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. If there are just some astronomically bad teams at the bottom of the conference, it's probably just better if they keep losing and your top teams aren't losing to them. But you're right. These key out-of-conference matchups are going to go a long way in determining how many bids each of these conferences get. Now, it's not as simple as, okay, well, based on how the Big Ten did, they're going to get 7, or based on how the Big 12 did, they're set on getting 9, but it certainly does play a major factor. And yeah, in terms of just ranking where these conferences are right now, I do probably think the SEC might sneak its way back up to 2 or 1 going forward. But so far, they've just been losing a lot of those big games against other power conference teams. Like we just mentioned earlier, Kentucky losing that game to Louisville. We had Florida losing their head-to-head against Arizona. So just couldn't really put them any higher than 3 right now. But I still think there is some good strength in that conference overall. Big Ten, they pretty much haven't lost any big games yet, so put them at the top. And Big East, putting them at the bottom, mainly because out behind UConn, the really only other contender I see is St. John's, and they lost their first chance at a quality win already. So one of your 2 teams that might be a contender lost their biggest game so far, and I don't see much more in depth and at all after that. Creighton probably would have been the next team, and they just got rolled by Gonzaga.
Yeah, and I think the point, the St. John's thing too, they lost at home, which of course is, worse than losing on a neutral floor or on Alabama's floor. But of course, it's early in the season, so there's plenty of time for these conferences to make it up. So then a couple of the questions then, just sort of about the teams so far this year. We've only a couple games in. Who do you see as the teams that are sort of underperforming or overperforming where you had anticipated up to this point?
Absolutely. And they're still undefeated, so I can't say they're massively underperforming so far, but I am a little worried about what I've seen from Auburn thus far this season. Obviously, barely scraping by Bethune in their first game in overtime. They're going to get a chance later on this week. They're playing Houston on Sunday, so they can really show us, hey, that was a fluke game, and we're able to compete with one of the best teams in the country, but something in my head's thinking that might be a blowout and Auburn might continue to be trending in the wrong direction. And in terms of teams that have impressed me, I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I know they haven't played any of like the really elite teams yet, but they've played Creighton. They've played Oklahoma, 2 solid power conference teams, and they haven't just beaten them. They have just not even looked like they were on the same level as them. I wasn't sure if this was going to be a vintage Gonzaga team that could compete for a title, but so far they have more than taken care of business. So I am impressed by them, but I'm going to pump the brakes a little. We'll see if they can actually do it against a top team, but I have liked what I've seen so far.
And then looking forward to the week till we meet again next week, next Wednesday. What games are you watching and that you can have the most effect, you think, on the seeding and conference shuffling?
Yeah. I mean, normally later on in the year, probably my answer here would be a lot of the teams around the bubble. But at this point, it's way too early to even know what the bubble is going to be. So yeah, this early on, I'm looking at the big marquee games between the teams that we're looking at as the top 4 seeds. And kind of over the next 4 days, there's really one big one each day. On Thursday, we have Purdue, Alabama. I mean, I think winner of that game, I would probably have projected as my number 1 overall seed going forward. Obviously, I have Houston right now, but winner of that game would then have a big win and was already on my 1 line. So that's a massive one. Arizona, UCLA coming up on Friday. I said I've been impressed by Arizona so far this year. That was a nice win over Florida, but I think UCLA is definitely a contender in the Big Ten that's not getting enough respect so far this year. So if they were to go in and beat Arizona after Arizona beat the defending champs, I think UCLA is going to be on a lot more people's radars. Then on Saturday, I got UConn BYU circled as my game of the day for that day. BYU came in with a lot of hype this year, ranked higher than they'd been in the preseason in a long time, probably since the Jimmer days. And they're undefeated, but they haven't probably looked like the world beaters everyone expected so far. Maybe a little closer in some of those games, like Delaware, for example. But hey, you go and you beat UConn, then you really are going to be living up to the hype. So, yeah, those are kind of the next 3 days, big key games. And then obviously on Sunday, already mentioned before, Houston, Auburn. Let's see if Auburn can get back on track.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there, and we thank you everyone for joining us. Be sure to join us next week when we come back, and we're going to be back with another update. If please send along questions. You're certainly welcome to jump in while we're filming live, although it's not much time to get on live. We're not on very long, but hit us up, Dom up at Bracket Dom, or you can hit him on email at bracketdom@gmail.com. And so until next week, we'll see you guys later. Have some fun watching. And if you're on got YouTube TV, hopefully you can watch the Purdue game since ESPN.
Fingers crossed they get that taken care of. It's about time.
Yeah, one of these days they'll get those good Giants will get things figured out. All right, so see you guys later. Bye.
See ya.